Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have an upload that will bring a smile to many of your faces. Before we get into it, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. My merch, displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? I'd like to give everyone kind of a heads up on Victor. After I had him on, we had talked a little bit, and we kind of had a plan on something that we were going to work on. I am currently still working on it, though. Victor was really not doing great. He sounded very tired. So he ends up going into the hospital. I've not spoken to him since I've spoken with his son, Scott. And as of right now, Victor is not well. I don't think he will be ever back on the channel. And that is something that I'm not saying it's because of, I don't want him here. It's because of his health condition. So I really wanted to share this with you guys. I have a couple of other things that I have that I'm going to work on and put out, but I think you guys will really like this. And after hearing it, those of you who would be willing to, please pray for him and his family. I talked with Scott, his other son, Bob, and Scott's wife, Nicole. Very good people. So let's get into this. Cades, Cove, Tennessee, June 2020, cave-type people. Well, the pandemic was in full swing and the national parks were closed down around the nation. So some cleanup work needed to be done before the start of the next time the public was allowed back into the parks. The park that I received the most calls from was Cades Cove in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, located in Tennessee and is on the 9-mile loop road. It's not Bigfoot, werewolves, or even Dogman they are asking for help with. You'd never guess, but it's feral humans, except for the fact that they dress like cave people. Our rangers of the Forest Service had engaged them on numerous occasions and not fared too well. So finally, I decided to take on one of the great mysteries of the national parks. It all started way back in 1968. Paul Kindle was making his final rounds to make sure everyone was out of the park when he spotted 3 people at the back side of one of the fields. He whistles and gets their attention and motions for them to come his way, but instead they move behind an old cabin on the hill. He blows his horn on his service truck and watches as one sticks its head out from behind the building, and then he yells at them to come down. The park is closing and it's time to leave. After 5 or so minutes, he thinks they must not be from the country and don't understand what I'm saying. So now he's trying to think how to explain it to them to make him understand without making them upset. So he bumps up the hill, getting closer, thinking, what a way to start the weekend off. No help in the park but me. And rounds the corner, and his eyes cannot believe what he's seeing. 2 males dressed in what look like animal furs covering their male parts, and 1 female with furs covering her bottom half. They were dirty and ragged looking. They had heavy forehead, thick lips, long hair. The 2 men were extremely hairy, the woman only slightly less. He reached for his door handle. Then the rocks and spears start raining down. The windshield was broke and he was hit with one of the rocks that came in over the open door of the truck. He retreated in his battered truck back down the hill. He fled in reverse, not looking where he was going. But after reaching the main road again and being able to get on the radio and call for help, did he start to look up back at the hill again and watch them calmly walk to the southwest and out of sight before darkness fell. And he was left alone again till his supervisor finally showed up and got his statement and carried him for treatment. Fast forward, July of 1973. A Hampshire family from upstate Pennsylvania is visiting for the time with their dad George, wife Madeline, and their twins Heather and Alice. They have already been around the loop road twice today and are told this is the best way to see black bear. They have seen them around home but want to see one down here in the Smoky Mountains. So after a long lunch break, they all crossed their fingers and started their third trip around the loop. They had almost gone when Alice asked her dad why those 4 men were chasing that deer with spears and dressed in shorts. He immediately pulled over so he could look and could not believe what he was seeing. There, no more than 125 yards out in the horse pasture, is 4 cavemen, as the report would read. He stated that he and his family watched for 3 minutes as these cavemen chased this deer around the field until it finally ran off and left them standing in the middle of the field, at which time they noticed that they were being watched and headed to the nearest large patch of trees. When they made the report, the ranger got on the radio and called for more rangers, and when they arrived, they spoke where they could not hear them. Then all but one headed toward the area they had shown the original ranger, who was still with them. And then he directed them to move along the way and leave the park as soon as he got to the other side, and not to enter. They followed them all the way out. Let's move up to October 75. The park is packed with visitors, with the leaves changing color, and the whole loop road is backed up with traffic. Here comes the Cruz family from San Antonio, Texas. There's Jose Maria, her parents, Guillermo and Mary. The parents at the time were both in their late 80s and were being brought to the Great Smoky Mountains for their first trip ever out of the state of Texas. The 2 men are riding in front of the car with the women in back. Guillermo is a veteran of the Korean War and Vietnam War, serving 3 tours in Vietnam before getting wounded, and they would not let him return on combat duty. They had just passed the halfway point of the modern-day Middle Rest area when they topped over a hill, and he asked Jose if that's what a hillbilly looks like. Jose said, "What?" and pulls over to see what his father-in-law is talking about. Unable to see what he is talking about, he gets out with his wife and sees 2 figures walking away. They described them as cave people, one man wearing a loincloth and a female with a loincloth. Both had heavy brows, and the male was extremely hairy. Jose said they were both very thick, and then they were out of sight. Jose said he wasn't about to follow them. Now let's jump to the winter of 2004. Snow is on the ground, and a pair of rangers, Tim and Beth, decide to patrol the park and see if all is quiet. After they open and lock the gate behind them, they know that the only people that they might see is a hiker on the Appalachian Trail, if any at all. After they slide down the steepest portion of the loop road, they notice tracks along the side of the road. Beth says to Tim, "You need to look at these." Tim stops the truck and exits, walks around to have a look, and says in a kind of disbelieving voice, "Barefoot?" He then looks around for a minute and gets back in the truck and calls it in to his supervisor. The supervisor informs them to lock the doors of the truck and drive straight out of there and do not ask any more questions, and to call when they get out. It took them 45 minutes to finish the rest of the loop in the snow, and Beth jumped out and opened the gate, and he drove through, with her locking it behind them. Tim then called back in, and the supervisor told him to return to the ranger station. Once they walked inside, he wanted to talk to them one at a time, so Beth went first. He told her to write up her report in front of him. After that, he had another senior ranger come in from a joint office. He informed her that she was being let go for going into a restricted area when snow was on the ground and to follow the other ranger. Meanwhile, he calls Tim into the office and does the same thing, asking him to write his report in front of him. Tim, being with the rangers, asks him what he would like it to say. Thus is how this report came to be. Another report came in September 2008. While picking up trash cans and putting new liners in the bear drums for trash, a young man, name unknown, said he was picking up the last barrel and he felt like he was being watched. So he turns and starts to scan the woods behind him, thinking it may be a bear, and couldn't see anything, so he turns back to his work. He hears a twig snap, and he turns as fast as he could, but still nothing. As he stays still watching the woods, now he sees a head rise above a downed log, and he notes that it was a heavy brow with very shaggy hair. Then starts to raise itself from behind the log. He notes how thick-bodied it was and how much hair was on its body. Its lips were heavy, its nose flattened on its face, and it's holding what appeared to be a spear. And being alone when he stepped over the log, jumped back into the truck and headed for the ranger station and didn't slow down till he got there. Let's move forward to more recent times. August 18th, 2015. The campground just outside of Cades Cove was at peak capacity. The on-site ranger was getting nightly reports from campers that something was prowling around in the early morning hours from like 1:30 till 4:30. And after people started turning their lights on, whatever it was would leave the area. So after 3 nights of this, Rex had his fill and asked his wife to check people in and out so he could stay up at night and catch whatever it was. Drinking his coffee, getting ready to start walking the campground, so he checks his sidearm and his shotgun and heads out the door. He turns on his flashlight and starts down the first row of campers and tents. Looks at his watch, and now it's 01:35. So he moves into the next row, moving as quiet as he can in the gravel roadbed, and only using his flashlight as needed. When he completes the second row, he thinks these people may be just pulling my leg. He looks once again at his watch, and now it's 205 hours. Well, ain't this a fine thing I have gotten myself into? Then, from somewhere towards the back, one of the dogs starts growling. There's no barking, just some serious growling going on, so he abandons going row by row, and now heads towards the growling dog, but slowly. He comes to the last of the pole campers and can tell the dog's at either the third from the last or the second. These are 2 of the ones that had made a report and had said they were going into town for the night. But he didn't know they had left their dogs, so he started his walk up the final row of campers. Other than some spots that were for tents, only they were also full. Something snapped, and the dog shut up at once. He stopped in his tracks, looking everywhere to make sure a bear wasn't sneaking up on him. He stood there for a long while. There was no noise from anywhere, so he glances at his watch. 02:42. Still no noise, so he did a 360-degree turn slowly and took in everything. So he starts his movement forward again and reaches the edge of the third trailer. He stands there and listens, but not hearing anything. Oh, he moves the shotgun up to his shoulder, ready to fire. He rounds the corner and sees the dog on the ground 10 feet from the front of the trailer. He's shown his light and sees nothing but the dog between the two trailers. As he walks up to the dog, he bends down on one knee to feel the dog. It's still warm. Its neck is broke. Still going over the dog for other wounds because a bear would have killed it with its paw or a bite its neck, and there was neither. About this time, he gets a cold chill, and he's starting to stand up. He sees 5 figures standing in front of him. The nearest one had to be 4 to 5 feet in front of him. The rest maybe 8 to 12. He stared hard at what he was seeing. If you had a picture of cavemen, then you would have known what he was up against that night. He spoke softly with his head down for mostly 5 minutes, not knowing what to expect from which one the attack would come from, but it never happened. When he raised his head, they were gone. He hurried back to his camper, woke up his wife, supervisor on duty, and he told him that he quit, and if he wanted his stuff, he better be there by the time he got everything ready to go. That they were going back to the city. He showed up and tried to talk him out of it, but he was having none of it. This brings us to the final file I will share. There had been about a dozen more, all in similar ways. April 2019, getting the park ready for opening morning. Ranger Carl Simmons had just opened the gate and asked the people at the gate to give him 15 minutes head start before heading into the park. So as he comes to the first church on the left, he notices something out of order. He jumps out of his truck and sees the problem and heads back to his truck when something is either thrown or someone hits him in the back of his head and knocks him out cold. The cars start coming around. The first car doesn't stop to help, but the second van does. He's bleeding badly from his wound. They get on his radio and call for help. After 34 minutes or so, a few rangers show up, and the people in the van tried to tell them about the people that look like prehistoric people, but they were forced to move along. Now, to the hunt. It happened in June of 2020. Most of my guys right now were recruits. As I have lost many to different ways, we land in the horse pastures, and the first thing I find is they have campers in the campground, so I get in touch with the groundskeeper and give him 24 hours to get everyone out. He was mad, wanted to know who I thought I was, coming in here and giving him orders like that, and that he only answers to the governor's office. All I said was, you better see how that works out for you. We set up our tents, myself, 2 men that had almost 50 years between them, and 6 raw recruits. They were combat hardened, so I was not too worried about their performance with what we were going to be up against. As they cleared the campground, I sent the 2 older members of the party to do a 1-mile sweep and to be back by dark. The rest of the men I told to watch the exiting campers and make sure no one took off on foot, and then I placed one in charge of a meal at 1900 hours. And I would take first watch myself if any problems arose to get me. I'd be in my tent. I was going to lie down and rest till the afternoon, thinking there had been one sitting in the field where we were sleeping then first night, and 2 more in the next mile or so. I was hoping for a good report from my men in the field. 1600 hours, and I'm up checking on the progress. From the campground, and they still have 33 to get out before the morning. They said some are empty and trying to get in touch with the owners. I told him we would be there at 1,000 hours to burn what's left to the ground. My final say on the matter. I left knowing that they would be gone and we would carry on with our hunt. My 2 senior officers report back just after dark and right before our meal. Both reported that they found no tracks or signs of any kind of heavy upright walking creature. I assigned 3 men to each senior officer. and said I would be taking the lead as we advanced, and that I would want 4 to the left and 4 to the right. Darkness set in. We ate, and everyone was out like lights at midnight. Here comes my replacement so I can lie down, and now I'm really going to try to sleep. And I do, but I'm up early to get ready for a short day and engage the men and let them know my plans in slow movement that I think will be the best approach for this operation, and that we will be here till we get the results. I send 2 men to check the campground, and they return and tell me 1 camper remains. I ask, "Is it on fire?" And they say no. Why not? No reply. I guess I'll have to do it myself, I said, and headed that way. When I got back over there were 2 men putting axles on the trailer so it could be pulled out. I asked who owned the trailer, and he introduced himself and said he pulled the trailers all night, making sure his would be the last one, and if I gave him an hour, it'd be gone. I told him from the military standpoint this is the reason, and he said he understood, and that he served 22 years in the Army. So I told him to leave it and go into town till you get the all clear, then come back, but not before. They jumped in his truck and they were gone. I headed back to the men. Everything was packed and ready to go. I told them the formation. I wanted everyone with spacing on each side at 5 yards following me. As we come to each location where there had been a sighting, we go into that area and search the area very well. After we searched each area along the way, we find no signs of any prehistoric cavemen. In these areas, the raw recruits could see on their faces that something wasn't sitting well with most of them. So I stopped them just after the 6th search we did and asked them to tell me what was wrong. 4 of them stepped up to speak to me, and I told them to go ahead with their questions, as this is how you learn. One of the recruits stepped in front of the others and said that I had an open door policy, and they all had the same concerns, and he would be speaking for the 4. I said, "Go ahead." He then addressed me and said, "We think that checking all of these sites where there have been previous sightings is a waste of time and needs to focus more on just looking to spot them. We moved maybe 4 or 5 miles tops, and we could have covered a lot more ground if we were not doing these searches." Okay, how many feels this way? All speaks for far, raise your hands. 3 hands went up, and it seems 1 has had a change of heart. So I asked the 1 to explain why we did these unnecessary searches, and his response was spot on, locating them and how, bare feet. Everyone understand now? 1 more question, he asked. How will we know? We follow the tracks till they end? Any more questions? Then let's get back to work and do our jobs. Right? We start moving along, and we come to the spot where the 1968 event took place. And it's a huge field with a cabin tucked in the very back corner. We stopped on the road, and I ordered the 3 to set up everyone's tents and prepare everyone a meal while the rest of us searched the field's edges and around the cabin in the back. And it wasn't long before one of the recruits sounds out that he has footprints on the edge of the woods. I make my way over because they have not been through our tracking program, and they cannot tell how fresh they are. When I see the tracks on the ground and get excited, they were fresh, maybe 6 hours old at the most. I order everyone back to the camp and update everyone on the find. I then get my 2 senior officers and start to formulate our plan for action. After our meal, the senior officers go over the plans for the following days with each recruit. We also post 3 men at the time to cover our camp after we bed down. Then before dark, we have everyone tear down their own weapon and make sure it's functional, and everyone is now locked and loaded. I take the last watch with the 2 recruits and post them along the paved road about 75 yards apart, and I take the back side of the camp in the field about 35 yards behind the tents. What a beautiful night. No lights anywhere. The stars seem to be dancing in the sky. Nothing happens on anyone's watch, so we are up with the sun. As camp is being torn down this morning, the birds are not singing and there is no movement from anywhere. With camp and breakfast done, we have eaten, we load up our packs, and we start to move out. Travis heads out to follow the tracks, and we are going to flank them on the road, so we have communication with them through handheld devices. We finally lose sight of them, but it's not long before we see them angling back toward the road, and then he keys his radio, which means he has movement but not confronted what it is. We stop, and finally I hear a click that gives me the all clear to move forward, and we all move about a half a mile and meet back up with Travis's group. We stop, discuss what he saw, and he reports that he saw nothing but one of his recruits saw movement between them and us, but nothing had come out. So myself, Travis, and one more recruit double back to check the area again to see if they may have squatted down like deer sometimes do, or was it something else. We spent about 2 hours doubling back and then made a line and tried to drive whatever it was out to the remainder of the group. Nothing ever came out, but I felt good that we were on the right trail now. We're all heading back together now and start down the road again as the path had come back out onto the road. We are going down the steepest portion of that road before you get to the midway village, and the hair on my arms and neck are standing up. There in the roadbed ahead of us, walking, are 7 to 9 beings that look like they are carrying spears, and they have something across one of their shoulders. As they walk, we still have our packs on, and the back one in the group keeps looking back, but we keep hitting the ditches and hiding. When we reach the rest center, I order everyone to lose their packs so we can travel faster and easier. After this, we follow them into the Great Smoky National Park and the southernmost boundary of Cades Cove. We are no longer in Cades Cove now. We follow them another 2 miles when we lose sight of them, and there's a clearing within a couple of 100 yards, and we group back up there, and finally Steve finds a wide entrance to a cave, and we see smoke coming up and out of the ground on the top of the hill. We make our way over to the cave entrance, myself on one side and Steve on the other. Travis has positioned all of the recruits in a semicircle around the front of the cave. Myself and Steve are going in to try and get a head count, and also to draw them outside the cave. So this is one big cave, I guess. It went back 60 yards. And at the back, they had a huge fire burning, torches leading back to the back. I got my head count and had a total of 16. There were 10 men, 6 women, the best I could tell. Steve had the same count, and the formation being rock inside, we both jumped from our hiding spot and got their attention. They started cooing and grunting and grabbing their spears and bows and arrows, looking devices. And out we both went, took our positions and waited, and before long here came 9 men. When they got to the outside, they were in a bowling pin formation, missing the 7 and 10 pins. I had screamed for them to stop, and they did, but they didn't understand a word I said. Then they started this chant and started moving forward towards one of the men. I ordered a single shot only, as we needed to capture as many as possible. I told them not to shoot unless they were getting close with the bow and arrow type device, but they could throw the spears further than I thought they could have. Now we were under attack, so I took the first shot and hit one of them in the upper leg, and they all jumped, but he didn't go down. About the same time, one of the recruits was hit in the left shoulder, and they were still moving forward, so after all of us sending rounds over their heads and then ducking their heads, some men were ready to back up. I gave the order to shoot at will. After 1 or 2 minutes, I called for a ceasefire. They were all dead on the ground and had crawled back into the cave where the others were waiting. So myself and Steve head inside with sidearms only, plus five of the recruits. I was leading the way, and had to finish off 2 that were damaged with far more shots than a normal human could take, and we plan on putting them in zip-tie cuffs and flying back to Virginia. We had counted 8 dead or down, and needed to locate the other one that came out to fight. And we're looking for a place he could hide as a place to escape, but the others were here. We split our paths with Steve going right, me left. As we separated, I heard a human grunt and turned to see Steve standing with a spear sticking out of his stomach. I yelled and spotted the other one with another spear in his hand, when one of the recruits starts shooting him and walking forward toward him till he fell down from being shot too many times. He reloads as one of the other recruits checks on Steve. Now I'm over the old man in the cave as the recruits wage war with the female-type cave people. I have him rolled over and have cuffs on him when 2 of the females launch an attack on me. I throw one of them on my left off, and then out of nowhere a stone knife is buried into my upper left chest. Now Travis and the rest of the recruits are in the fight, and now we are finally ahead in this fight. Travis comes in and orders everyone killed that's not already in cuffs, which comes to 1 old man, 1 young boy, and 2 women. They get Steve out first and work on his wound, and then I tell them to patch up the recruit, and then they help me out. I send 1 man back to get as many packs as he can, plus the radios. Now I have the rest start to get all of the dead bodies in one place, so they will be easy to access. I'm lying next to Steve, and I ask how he is, and he says we're getting too old for this. I agree, and start to look at one of the dead specimens lying close to me. I get 2 of the recruits to measure the height. He's the largest of them. He is 5'9", and he has to be 2 to 3 inches taller than the others. I'm guessing his weight, but I believe he would have tipped the scales at 225. Where to start? His feet are like ours, only slightly bigger and much rougher. Calves are short, but are all muscle. His upper legs look like he had been pushing weights for years. His torso was thick and stocky and covered in hair like the rest of his body. He had wide, strong shoulders, and his arms were abnormally long with giant hands that are almost twice the size of mine. His head is larger than that of a human being. His long hair matted and had a pungent odor to it. His chin is straight, squared. His teeth are big and squared and dirty as all get out. His nose was flattened and pushed back on his face, and then he had the coolest green eyes I had ever seen on any living being. About that time he arrived back the radio and 3 of the packs, so I got on the radio to get us picked up and sent 3 recruits back for the rest of the packs to ask for 3 helicopters to come pick us up, and also request at least 32 additional men from the academy to help load the bodies. Just a little over 2 hours, and here they came. They loaded the first chopper with the wounded and living along with the hostages that we headed to Virginia. They then dropped off the cadets with 1 officer, loaded the bodies into a cargo net, and pulled them into the helicopter bay. And then they picked up the cadets and both headed back to Virginia. As of today, they still have 3 specimens alive as the old man died. They estimated his age to be about 109 years old. They continue to study them at our underground facility. Like I said, guys, I've been working on something with Victor. I did not want to share that, but I felt it necessary to share. I have other files that I will work on to get my project done. I pretty much ask everyone to pray for Victor. At this time, he is not going to get better. I just pray that he goes in peace. He was a good friend of mine, and he gave us a lot of knowledge. A lot of people didn't think he was real, but I myself believed he was real. I feel that he was sent here to share valuable information, but to confuse as well. But when he got to meet me and know me more, I think he was as honest as he could be. He still was loyal to the agency. So, with that, I want to thank everybody for all your support. Please practice kindness, and may the Great Spirit watch over us all, and may He guide us through that path that we call life.